Thank you everybody for joining us today. This presentation will be an introduction to researching your ancestors from this border region. So you might hear the region pronounced differently, either Alsace or Alsace, maybe depending on where you are in the world. And also due to the region's colorful history and its blend of French and Germanic cultures. Traditionally, it sounds more like Alsace with a Z sound, but either way, we will focus on researching and obtaining clues to help us cross the pond and start finding and using international records. So I set up the presentation today as a little bit of a case study with some examples related to how I researched some of my Alsace ancestors. So we'll cover finding and using vital records, passenger lists, censuses, and church records to uncover your Alsatian origins. And we'll also talk about what you can track down online and resources that we have here at the Genealogy Center that can aid you in your search. So I'd like to start by delving into some historical background of the region. So this is important because it provides some context for the evolution of the area over the centuries, which will influence our approach to record searches and determining the availability of records as well. So throughout its history, Alsace has been a coveted region and its borders have shifted often. So initially, it was part of the Roman province of Germania Superior and became a border area between French and German cultures and languages. It was annexed by France in 1648 after the 30 Years' War, and the area saw additional conquests in the following century. After the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 and 1871, it became part of the German Empire until World War I, when it was returned to France by the Allies. Then post-World War II, the area reverted to French control after German occupation, and it remains under French control today. And all of these historical fluctuations have significant impact on genealogical research. So, along with the shifting control and borders between France and Germany, linguistic diversity is also a defining aspect of Alsace's history. Germanic dialects prevailed historically, and periods of linguistic and cultural assimilation occurred. So, French influence grew after Louis XIV's annexation in the late 17th century, but despite these changes and fluctuations, Alsatians maintained a strong identification with their German heritage, and that can be seen in a lot of the family names, traditions, and the cultural practices, which often remained rooted in those Germanic origins, and those provide valuable clues for genealogy research. So the first step with any kind of genealogical research is to identify what you know, and it can be really tempting and exciting to jump into international records right away, searching for your ancestors in the old country, but you'll want to research them as much as you can in the United States first and cover everything you can about their lives there, and that will make your international research much easier. So what do you know about your grandparents and your great-grandparents? Where did they live? What was the family's religious tradition? Do you know who your immigrant ancestor was? When did they arrive? Do you know the ship's name? Do you have any family documents laying around that might provide clues? All of these variables and puzzle pieces of information will add up to help you create a more complete picture of your family story. So this is Mary, and she is our starting point today for tracing family back to Alsace. And this is some of the background information that we're starting with. So she was born in 1887 in Cincinnati, and she married Leo Kruger in 1906. They had two children, William and Marcella, and he died of influenza in 1914. She married William Schmidt in 1922. They had one daughter named Ruth, and she died of a stroke at the age of 46 in 1933. So with that background information, I researched Mary, and The censuses, marriage and death records, and those kind of things reveal a lot of good information that led me back to the previous generation. So, comparing Mary's information in all of her records, we see that she appears first in the 1900 census, since the 1890 census is not available to us. So, in 1900, she was age 13, and she's living with her parents, George A. and Maggie Bronner. And almost all of the census data reflects that her father was born in Germany and her mother was born in Minnesota. And that's with the exception of the 1920 census, which reflects her father being born in France. And so that isn't too surprising to us since we know that it's a border region and the borders shifted often. So in 1930, she again listed her father's birthplace as Germany. But some of the most valuable information that we get is from Mary's death certificate. And on her death certificate, her father's birthplace is listed specifically as Alsace, Lorraine, and her mother's is also listed more specifically as Minneapolis. And we have a new variation of her father's name. He's listed as August Bronner this time, and her mother is listed with her maiden name, Margaret Minton, instead of Maggie. And the death certificate also tells us that Mary is buried in Old St. Joseph's Cemetery in Cincinnati, which is a Catholic cemetery. And so that's a great clue. And since I know that she was Catholic, I can begin to look for her and for the family in those church records as well. Church records are very valuable and they tend to hold a lot of hidden clues. So if you can get your hands on church records as you're tracing back to your immigrant ancestors, those will likely be beneficial to your research. And in the case of ancestors from Alsace, they're likely either going to be Catholic or Lutheran. So to find church records in the US, there are multiple avenues that you can explore. So first you'll want to identify the denomination. And this might be something that you find through a marriage record or an obituary that makes a notation of the church where the person's funeral took place, or in our case, from the death certificate, because we knew that she was buried in a Catholic cemetery. And then once you know the denomination, you can work on locating the church records. So many churches keep their own records, but you might find that they're deposited in a regional archive. And many church records are also making their way online through websites like Ancestry, Family Search, Find My Past, and those kind of databases. So Family Search in particular has a vast collection of church records from various denominations. And you can also contact the church directly if it's still active or explore local archives or libraries. Especially with older or smaller congregations, you might find that the records are held in a local repository. When you're seeking out church records on Family Search or other types of records, which might not be indexed yet or are keyword searchable, the catalog is a good place to go, and it's hidden here under the search button. So you'll want to search for the state and the county and the town or city where your ancestors lived. And in this case, I'm sticking with my Cincinnati example. So under the church records category, you can then explore all of the listings for the digitized records and the location that you're researching to see if your ancestors' church may be among those listed. And from there, you'll be able to explore any available baptismal, marriage, death, or other sacramental records. Find My Past, again, is an additional database that is helpful for uncovering church records, especially if your ancestors happen to be Catholic. Find My Past is free when you're here in the Genealogy Center, and they partnered with a number of Catholic dioceses in the US, including Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Cincinnati. So those are just a few that they've partnered with. And then Find My Past is where I located this 1887 baptismal record for Mary. So this record for her came from St. Paul's Church, which was located in the Pendleton neighborhood in Cincinnati, and it was a German-speaking parish. And it tells us that she was born on the 23rd of March, baptized the next day, and it lists her parents, August and Margaret. And the record lists the names in their Latin form. So her name looks like Maria Margaretha, so an equivalent to Mary Margaret. And her father was August Bronner, and her mother was listed as Margaret Minton. and it lists her father, his birthplace is Alsace, Germany, but instead of the French spelling that we know today, it's spelled Elsas, which reflects a more German spelling, and so you'll commonly see that spelling with two S's at the end if it's a more German spelling. So we have a kind of a comfortable amount of information related to Mary, and now we can start to trace further back to her parents. So this is George Bronner, her father, and his wife Maggie. So we're going to focus on George's line because he is the immigrant ancestor. And I made a chart similar to the one I had for Mary for records related to George. So the 1880 census is the first time that he makes an appearance, and he's with his parents, age 16. His birthplace is listed as Alsace, and the 1900 census gives an immigration year of 1878, and he says that he's naturalized. And the 1910 census also says that he's naturalized, but it gives an immigration year of 1890. And so that doesn't add up because we know that he was in the US at least 10 years prior. So it's good to keep those potential errors and outlying pieces of information in mind when you're searching and when you're analyzing and correlating those records. So then his death certificate gives his parents' names, and they're listed as Joseph Bronner and Magdalena Ostenheimer. So looking at immigration, starting in the late 1820s and continuing throughout most of the 19th century, many people from Alsace and other German-speaking areas began to immigrate to the United States and to Canada, seeking a better life. And there were a number of factors that played into their immigration: economic, political, and social. So looking at the economy, there were agricultural challenges. So many farmers were facing challenges like overpopulation and crop failures and poor harvests, and that led to poverty. And the Industrial Revolution also brought a lot of changes. So some areas of Europe saw great economic growth from this, but also unfortunately saw a lot of the traditional industries decline. So this included work like hand weaving. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, Alsace had a very strong tradition of hand weaving, with many small family-run workshops producing textiles, and the production of linen and wool textiles was a significant part of their economy. And with the Industrial Revolution and the rise of mechanized cotton mills and the imports of cheaper raw materials from other places in other countries, it reduced the competitiveness of local linen and wool, and it led to a decline in the craft. So other industries like handcrafted pottery, small vineyards, artisanal blacksmithing, leather goods, basket weaving, those are just some of the other industries that saw a lot of decline due to the Industrial Revolution as well in the area. So you might find that your immigrant ancestors held these occupations in the old country prior to their immigration and then came to America for better opportunities. So the political factors included turbulence with the 1848 revolution and then the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 and 1871. So that brought a lot of unrest, and it prompted a lot of people to seek what they saw as a more stable life in America. And chain migration was also a large social factor, which many initial immigrants settled in the United States and sent letters over to family encouraging them to join along. So many people who settled in the United States from Alsace settled in Midwestern states like Ohio and Wisconsin, Illinois, Missouri, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, Chicago, and St. Louis were all cities that saw notable Alsatian communities. And there were also Alsatian immigrants that settled in Texas as well. And of those who settled in Canada, there were a considerable number that chose the provinces of Quebec and Ontario. So Montreal and Toronto both housed sizable Alsatian communities as well. And the image at the right is a Monet painting that belongs to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and it depicts the port of Le Havre that is located in northern France. And many Alsatian immigrants sailed from this port on their way to their new homeland. So That'll be something to keep in mind as you begin to look for immigration records too. And aside from that ports at Hamburg, Germany, or Belgium would have been the second and third most common ports that Alsatian immigrants would have used. So moving to passenger lists, when you're searching for your ancestors, it's always a good idea to try a variety of databases. Different sites have different search algorithms, so your ancestors might pop up right away when you use one database and not another. In the handout, there are some specific collections within Ancestry and Family Search that you can utilize to search for passenger lists. And there's also the Ellis Island website, and there is a website by Steve Morse, which is pictured in the screenshot on the right. And his site offers one-step search functions. So the tools on his site fetch data from other websites, but they're designed to do so in a way that is more versatile than the search tools provided on some of the other sites. So that can be a great way to search for your ancestors and passenger lists as well. These are a few additional things that might assist in searching for your ancestors in passenger lists. So along with using a variety of databases, you'll want to narrow down your search by date range that aligns with the immigrant's estimated year of arrival. Try alternate spellings and name variations. Names were recorded phonetically or Americanized by the immigrants themselves upon arrival. So be sure to try different spellings and variations of the immigrant's name. For example, Johann versus John and vice versa. You could also try searching just under the last name and first initial. Another method of searching would be to use wildcards. So those are usually an asterisk or a question mark. If you're maybe not sure how the immigrant's name could have been recorded in the records. So for example, Jen with an asterisk could return results like Jennifer, Jenny, Jenna, those kind of things. You'll also want to use advanced search options along with narrowing down by arrival year. You can filter by occupation, nationality, or other criteria that you might have. And then lastly, you want to check for published indexes and transcriptions, but you'll want to verify the information by viewing the original records whenever possible. Speaking of indexes, sometimes you'll go through and try all kinds of different databases and lots of combinations of search terms, but your ancestors might just be elusive. So in that case, some of the published indexes, such as Germans to America, can be very helpful. And Germans to America is a series of books that we have here at the Genealogy Center, and they index ship passenger arrival records of German immigrants who came to the U.S. between 1850 and 1897. So there are 67 volumes, and they're organized chronologically, so you can search within them based on the approximate date of your ancestors' arrival. So based on that 1878 immigration date provided in the census for George August Bronner and his parents, Joseph and Magdalena, I found them in volume 34, and that covers October 1878 through December 1879. And their surname was slightly misspelled as Bronner with M's instead of Bronner with N's, so that's something that you might find. But they sailed from the port of Le Havre, arriving in New York on October 30th, 1878, and Joseph and Magdalena and all of their children are listed there. And there are a couple of slightly outlying pieces of information. So Magdalena's name is in there incorrectly as Madeline, but Madeleine can be a French version of Magdalena, so that's not too unusual. And the child that we're focusing on, George August, he's recorded as being 5 years old. But based on censuses and other records, we know that he was born in 1864, so he should actually be around 14 or 15. And mistakes with ages and spellings, those are pretty common on passenger lists, whether it was due to transcription when the information was indexed or due to the person that was recording the information. But the ages of his parents are accurate. The siblings that are listed, Joseph Jr., Charles, Teresa, and Magdalena, are also correct. And the only child that's not there is Henry, but he wasn't born until 1879. So with that information, we can pretty confidently identify this as the correct family. And along with Germans to America, there are some other books that might be helpful when searching for your immigrant ancestors. One is the Alsace Immigration Book, which was compiled by Cornelia Schrader Muggenthaler. And that one contains a listing of immigrants from Alsace, but also includes families who migrated from Germany and Switzerland. And it will include the town of birth. Another book that might be helpful, especially if your ancestors settled in Pennsylvania, is 18th Century Immigrants from Northern Alsace to America. And it includes the name of the immigrants, the ship arrival date, the village that they came from, and data on each family from the church registers there, as well as information on many of the families after their arrival in America. And we have both of these books available in the Genealogy Center. So back to our passenger list. After finding the indexed information, I located the actual passenger list based on the ship and the arrival date. And again, it's always good to review the original record and confirm what you found. And in the bottom right corner is the passenger list, the indexed information as it appears on Ancestry. And I noticed that the image on Ancestry was really blurry and it wasn't legible. So I searched on Family Search and found a higher quality image, which is shown here. So that's another reason why it can be helpful to check multiple databases. And with these earlier passenger lists, you might find that they'll offer the country of origin, but not the town of origin. And the town is the piece of the puzzle that we really need to be able to accurately and most effectively trace them back within Alsace. So along with church records and censuses that we mentioned a little bit earlier, I just wanted to emphasize again, researching as much as you can in the United States to hopefully uncover the specific town, which will make the international research much more feasible. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but a good number of items to begin to look into, such as vital records, birth, marriage, and death, both civil and church records. And again, passenger lists and naturalizations are valuable. And while the earlier ones might not offer a specific town, some of the more recent passenger lists and more recent post-1906 naturalizations, many times on those you will find that the town of origin is listed along with the name of the ship they traveled on when they immigrated. So sometimes finding the naturalization record can help you find the passenger list. And in addition, things like military service records or obituaries can also help you with tracking down the town of origin. Sometimes our ancestors are elusive, so if you have funeral cards or other family items like photographs, letters, family Bibles, those can offer great clues about your ancestors' town of origin as well. And if you find that you're hitting a dead end with records and you might not have family documents that offer clues about the name or the location of the town, you could try another approach. So you could research and review local histories in the area where they settled in the United States and kind of examine the immigration patterns for that town and start to identify the Alsatian towns that people were commonly coming from that settled in that area. So that might provide a good starting point when other records aren't providing the information that you need. Also, when you do have the records that might reveal a town name, sometimes deciphering the German sounding place names can be a bit challenging. So on the records, you might find that the initial letter might be illegible or it might be blotted out, or in the book that it came from, the binding might be too tight, or there might be a page torn, and you might be able to see only a few visible letters. So for these situations, there's a book called Alsace-Lorraine Place Name Indexes, and that can be really helpful. And it's a reverse alphabetical index that's designed to help you determine the correct town name for your ancestors. In this case, I didn't have luck with other records, but I did come across a copy of a page from a family Bible, and that provides a clue as to where exactly George August Bronner and his family came from in Alsace. So at the top, parents are listed: Joseph Bronner and Magdalena Ostenheimer. And George's siblings, Joseph, Charles, Teresa, and Lena, or Magdalena, are listed. But one of the best pieces of information here is George's birth date of February 20th, 1864, and his birthplace. To us, it looks like Ingwiller, but in German, it probably sounds more like Ingwiller. But now we have a town name to go off of. At the beginning, we talked a little bit about the history of the region, and now I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the particulars when researching the Alsace region. So there are two departments that comprise the former province of Alsace. And I probably won't get the pronunciation correct, but it's Bas-Rhin and Haut-Rhin. So they're not exactly equivalent to the concept of American states, but that might be the easiest way to think of them. So there are regions, which are then divided into departments, and the departments are divided into arrondissements and then further into cantons, and then lastly into communes. So the town that we're looking at as an example is Ingwiller, and it is the commune, and it's located within the Bas-Rhin department in what is today the Grand Est administrative region. And there are a couple maps at the bottom. The one on the left shows the two departments in red, so they're visible and you can see their location in comparison to the rest of the country. And then the other map there in the middle shows them a little bit closer up. So Bas-Rhin is the northern department and Haut-Rhin is the southern department. And it's also possible that you might see Alsace-Lorraine listed on your ancestors' records. So that could give you some clues. And that was a former territory of the German Empire, again, today located in France, and was established in 1871 by the German Empire after they occupied the region during the Franco-Prussian War. So the map on the far right represents Alsace-Lorraine in the context of the German Empire. So it covered the Bas-Rhin and Haut-Rhin departments of Alsace, as well as the Moselle department of Lorraine, which is to the north. So that's something else to keep in mind as you're uncovering records and starting to investigate where your ancestors' town of origin would be located. Back to family search, before I get too far ahead of myself. So one of the tools that you might find helpful is the research wiki. So you can find that hiding under the search button, and then you can search for topic or location. And this is the wiki page for Alsace, and it provides references to resources specific to Alsace. So it'll include things like immigration, maps, gazetteers, and a lot more there. And then if you glance to the right, there are links to the two departments. So there are specific wiki pages for them. And this is the wiki page for Bas-Rhin for that department. And it has a brief history, information regarding search strategies. There are links to the right to pages that provide more information on searching for various record types like cemetery or probate information. But the one that we're going to focus on today for getting started with Alsace research are the church and civil registration records. And you can grab the link to that collection on Family Search from one of these wiki pages, or the other way to do it is by going back to the catalog under the search button. And then you can start to type in the name of the town or the name of the department. In this case, I typed in Ingwiller town, and I have 3 results that populate that represent the location as it was referred to at various points in history. So you can click on any of those 3 options and it'll take you to the same place, to the same records there. When we do that search, we get a couple of categories: church records and civil registration, and there are records for both Catholic and evangelical churches. And a collection of civil records begins in 1792. So that's when civil birth, marriage, and death records began to be recorded in Alsace. So that should stay fairly consistent no matter what town that you're looking at, but the church records will vary. So some might begin a lot earlier than the civil records, others might start much later. So it'll depend on each individual church when they began keeping records and whether any documents were lost or destroyed. So my immigrant ancestor, George, was born in 1864, and I know the family was Catholic. So the Catholic records span from 1689 to 1792. So those will not be helpful to me right now. So I'll need to start with the civil records. And before we get to those, though, I did want to mention that there's an option to write for records that are not yet online due to privacy laws. And so these are formulas to write for civil registration or for church records, and that's available on the Family Search Wiki. So they will not make records available online that are less than 100 years old, but they might honor requests for more recent records for close family for genealogy. Clicking on that page for the civil records, in red text, there's a note that says that these records are online, and there's a link to click, and that usually indicates that the records are indexed and they're keyword searchable by name. So that would be the first thing to try. Sometimes names are not spelled correctly or indexed correctly, and that can make it more difficult to locate them through a keyword search. So scrolling down the page, that's where you'll find access to the film. So there are births, marriages, and deaths, and you can see that the collections are described in French. So depending on what kind of records you're looking at, whether they're church or civil, and where is going to influence what language they're in, whether it's Latin or French or German. So these civil records are in French. The records for evangelical parishes will usually be in German, and the Catholic records might be a mix of Latin and French. But the little camera icons on the right, you can click on those. So depending on what record you're looking for and what time period, you can click on the corresponding camera icon to dive into the digitized microfilm and peruse the dates to find your ancestor's record. For my keyword search for George August Browner, I had luck, and I can see by looking at the indexed information here that the birth year as well as parents Joseph Browner and Magdalena match the information that I know. And so next we'll want to look at the original record because it'll tell us a lot more than what the indexed information tells us. So for this particular record, it's a typed template, and there's some handwritten information there, which I think can be a little bit easier to decipher than a fully handwritten document. But on the left in the margin, we can see his name, Brauner George August. He was born in Ingviller in the arrondissement of Severn, born on February 20th, 1864, 8 p.m. The birth was recorded in the town hall the next day at 2 p.m. And he's the legitimate son of Joseph Brauner, who is the son of Ignace Brauner. And that's where that red arrow is pointing on the left. And it says that George's father, Joseph, is 25. He was a stocking weaver, born in Ingviller, and he still lives there. And it says that he's the son of Madeline, or Magdalena Ostenheimer. And so French versus German variations of names is going to be good to keep in mind. So we know that Magdalena, she went by Magdalena in the United States, but she's recorded here in this record as Madeline, which is more French sounding. George's father, Joseph, his father, it says, was Ignace, which is a variant of Ignatius, which is more French sounding. So you might get both influences there, French and German. So Magdalena is listed as his legitimate wife. There are two witnesses listed, Philippe Haberman and George Ostenheimer, who it says was 27. And based on the age and the name, we can probably assume that George is Magdalena's brother or her cousin. So now we have some good clues, and we know that George's father, Joseph, was born in Ingviller to Ignace Brauner, and his mother is unnamed, but all of these tidbits will add up to help us as we continue to search for more records. So going back to the Family Search Wiki again, there are genealogical word lists available, which are valuable resources for deciphering these records. So whether your ancestors' documents are in French or Latin or German, there are a number of genealogical word lists like this one that'll help with recognizing some of the common words and spellings. So having word lists kind of pulled up next to the records will help with recognizing the words for things like birth and death, child, daughter, son, morning, afternoon, things like that. Along with the word list, there are handwriting guides for the different languages available, which will help to also be able to recognize the letters as they usually appeared in handwritten form. The next record here, this is the marriage record of Joseph and Magdalena. And so we can see from this record, their marriage took place in April 1863. And Joseph is listed as a bachelor, 24 years old. He was born in Ingviller on November 22nd, 1838. He was working as a stocking weaver, and again, says he was the son of Ignace Bronner, age 55, who worked as a launderer, and his mother was Marie Roth, age 52. For Magdalena, it tells us that she is listed as a spinster, age 22, born in Ingviller on the 29th of January, 1841, and she is the daughter of George Ostenheimer, age 62, who worked as a plowman, and her mother was Therese Wenham, age 61. So now we have the ages of the bride and groom, and the names, ages, and the occupations of their parents, and so we can keep moving further back. And so we learned that Joseph's parents were Marie and Ignace on the marriage record. So then I used that information and the date of birth to find Joseph's birth record, and that confirms the information along with providing ages for the people listed, their jobs, and the witnesses. This is the marriage of Ignace and Marie, and within this record we learn that her full name is actually Anne Marie Roth, and her father is Paul Roth, and her mother is Gertrude Resch. And Ignace's parents are Martin Bronner and Madeline Jacobi. And this is where it can get a little bit trickier. I split this record into two because it was a little bit too long, but the earlier records are fully handwritten, so deciphering those can take a little bit more time, but the word list will help a lot with those and with breaking it down and extracting the vital information. So this is an 1806 record of Ignace Bronner's birth, and reflects his birth on September 24th at 6 in the morning, and he was born to Martin Bronner, age 48, and his mother was Madeline. So we looked at births and marriages. So this is an example of a death record, and this is an 1847 death for Martin Bronner, and Martin died at the age of 82, and it mentions in here that Madeline, his wife, that she was deceased. So we have a clue there that she died before him. And that's another clue, his wife's name, that we can use to confirm that it is in fact our ancestor. And his parents are listed as Joseph Bronner and Elizabeth Ullman. And it's noted that his father was also born in Ingviller, but his mother Elizabeth was born in a town I'm not sure how to pronounce, but it looks like Olungen, which is about 14 miles away from the town of Ingviller. So now we have more information to dive into the origins of his parents. So we started with Mary Margaret Bronner and her parents George August and Margaret Mitten. So we focused on George, our immigrant ancestor. And then with researching in the United States, to gain clues and to locate the town of origin in Alsace, we jumped across the pond, and then we were able to identify Mary's paternal grandparents and great-grandparents and two sets of great-great-grandparents. So, and there's still more to discover. So before we finish up, I wanted to mention the resources that we have here at the Genealogy Center. And this is the homepage of our website at genealogycenter.org. So using the search bar at the right, You can search our collection to find additional books and records and microfilm that we have related to Alsace. And the red button at the bottom for our resources, that'll take you to a list of our databases. So there are free databases there that you can utilize from home, as well as on-site databases that you can utilize here in person at the library. And we have 24 licensed databases in total. So these include Ancestry, newspapers.com, Newspaper Archive, Find My Past, and a lot of others. So one of our free databases is Percy, our periodical source index. And that's a subject index of local history and genealogy periodicals. And it has over 3.1 million citations. So there are a few ways to search. You can search by surname, by location, by article title keyword, or by research techniques. For a quick example today, we'll pick other countries, and it'll give you a full alphabetical list of countries. And Alsace is a choice there at the top. So you could choose that, or you could choose France or Germany and see what's available there as well. We'll select Alsace, and then we have a list of clickable categories on the left, and then the number of articles that correspond to each category on the right. So you can kind of go through and explore the articles that are indexed there for each of the categories. So I chose church records here, and I get a list of articles, and the first one on the list is titled Alsace and Lorraine in German History, Research Tips and Sources for Genealogists. And so the important information is there with that title, and it's also in the middle with the title of the periodical, the volume and issue number, and the call number. So you can utilize that information to track down the periodical when you're here in person at the Genealogy Center. And we don't have too much time today to spend on Percy, but I did want to mention on our website at the very top, you'll see a little play button icon, which will take you to our YouTube channel. And there are previously recorded programs there that you can watch, including a few programs on Percy, which go a lot more into depth into searching Percy and how to request articles. I would recommend checking that out. And then before I forget, I also wanted to mention that if you have any ancestors who settled here in Allen County or in Northwest Ohio, within our free databases under Allen County Resources, we also have a collection related to French families in the area, so that may be a good place to check, and that one is searchable from home. So that will finish us up for today. If you have any questions, you can email us at genealogy@acpl.info, or you can pop in the Genealogy Center, and you're always welcome to come in, and we're glad to help. And if there are any questions in the Q&A, I'll be glad to try and answer those.
What is the best way to determine your ancestors' boundary at a particular time in history, especially in determining which country currently has the records?
That's a good question. I think the best way, I'm not sure how to answer it because I don't know what information they have so far. So I'm not sure the best way to answer it right now. But maybe send us an email, and that's one that I can kind of think about and answer, because I want to give you a well thought out answer. So
Here's another one that might be a little more difficult, but how did the immigrants know where to settle?
I think a lot of factors played into that, and probably a lot of them either had other family that had immigrated first and had decided to settle in that area where their family immigrated, or maybe when they got here, when they arrived, they heard things from others who were also arriving where they were going. So it's hard to know, and it's very it'd be very dependent on each family, so in each situation.
Was it common for immigrants from Alsace to remain on the East Coast after arrival?
It could have been common. I know there were a lot of Alsatian families that stayed in the East Coast, and especially Pennsylvania, those areas. So I think it was common. East Coast and Midwestern states were the most common places where they settled.
What options do you have at the library to help with German, French, English translation if needed? I'll be visiting the library next month.
Yeah, we do have resources on, we have books on translation for various languages, so that might be a help to you while you're here. And we're also glad to help with any questions that you might have and see how we can help with deciphering some of those.
In records, are women listed with their maiden name or married name?
They will be listed with their maiden name.
This person's having a lot of trouble transcribing the handwritten documents. Is there an easy way to translate handwritten info?
There are some apps like there's Google Translate. There's another one that I can't think of off the top of my head that can help with translating and transcribing handwritten documents. If you'd like to send us an email, I'll take a look at that and see which one it is. But there are some good apps out there that can help kind of give a jump start and help with translating. So they might not get everything right, all of the words exactly right, but it can be a jumping off point.
Oh, somebody's recommending it looks like DeepL as a translation program. So that's kind of cool. I have ancestors from Nancy, but they also say Alsace Lorraine. Where should I research?
Okay, so it looks like it's in Lorraine. So I would, um, if they say Alsace-Lorraine, that included the Moselle department of Lorraine. So you could start first maybe with the Moselle department. And then if you don't have luck there, you could kind of spread your search out a little bit, maybe to other departments of Lorraine too.
Thank you, Kate, for a wonderful program. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our attendees learned as much as I did, if not more. So I'm very pleased to say thank you. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
everyone, for joining us today. And we will see you next time. Bye.